All right, so welcome to this conversation with the directors of Antigone from Whitworth University and Gonzaga University. I'm Kathleen Jeffs. I'm the chair of the Theater and Dance Department at Gonzaga, and I'm thrilled to be with you all this evening. I'm joined by Anouihl Fields and Josephine Keefe, who I would love to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about your vision for the Antigone that you're directing. And also, if you wouldn't mind telling us when it is, we may perceive it in whatever mode we're going to. Thank you. Josephine, you're up.
Okay, all right, that's me. Well, thank you, Kathleen, for having us. My name is Josephine Keefe, and I'm an adjunct professor at Gonzaga University and the director of our upcoming spring semester production of Antigone. Initially, when we were thinking about doing a production that I would be directing this year, it was pre-COVID and it was a different play. Over the course of the summer and the various events that took place, both within our own community and the larger nation and world, we realized, I think, as a department that maybe the play that we had in mind initially wasn't the right fit. We were discussing what should be the play that we explore, if there is to be one, that brings us all back together into the rehearsal space. So we landed on Antigone, and we can talk a little bit about that later. My vision for Antigone was to create a world that is coming out of the ruins, that is left in wreckage, that is trying to rebuild itself. A world in which, in the midst of that rebuild, there is a great debate about the balance between legality and morality. And it's between these two incredible opposing forces. It felt relevant to what I felt I was experiencing personally in my life, within my family, within, again, the community, and what I was seeing on TV. I felt that it was also something that was going to resonate with our audiences and be something that would resonate with the actors as well, as we explored those themes. So that was the vision that I started out with, and that's kind of what brought us to this point.
Thank you so much. All right, Anouihl, how about you?
Hi, thanks, Kathleen and Josephine. Man, it's so cool to hear other perspectives of the same story that we are all telling together at the same time. I'm really glad that we were all able to come together. I am Anouihl Fields Forbes. I am an assistant professor here at Whitworth and am directing Antigone here. And we actually had the story of Antigone slotted before COVID happened. We were planning on doing a different translation, and in the course of COVID events, that translation was not available for streaming. Then we switched to a different translation. This one, more of the traditional Sophocles version, translated by Ian Johnston. So what's interesting to me is that choice of the story of Antigone way back in the fall, when we were still in like normal times, we still felt like the story of Antigone has so much relevance kind of at any time in history. You can point to somebody standing up for their own personal conviction, state-sanctioned violence, or state-sanctioned laws that are challenging that conviction. And yet, since that decision was made way back in the fall of 2019, we just keep seeing events that enforce, wow, this is really contemporary. Whoa, this other thing happened. This is really contemporary. And I'm excited to have a larger conversation with all of us around that, because even as a cast, I will say that after January 6th happened, in rehearsal, we all had to sit around in a circle and say, whoa, is this what happens when someone takes the idea of personal conviction too far away from the importance of the rule of the state? A question that we wouldn't have considered in the same way if we weren't in the depths of the play of that in that moment. So I think both the current situation has helped us frame Antigone, and I think Antigone in turn has helped us turn back and frame the contemporary events that we are living in. I think it's been a really good dialectic between those two spaces. And we set our Antigone in modern times. We are doing a live stream recorded production. So we are done recording. It's in editing phase now. And March 19th, next Friday, is our opening night. And you can live stream it Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon. There's a talk back after our Sunday afternoon matinee. And because we were able to do the Sophocles version, and because we were recording, we also were able to include some more, I'll say contemporary, but also just more filmic elements into our production in a way that we can't do when we're on stage. So we have the choral odes, we changed them. We put them to original music. Katie and Anna are both singers for them. So we have this beautiful element of original music happening. And we also had an artist create time-lapse animations in response to those odes that audience will also get to experience. I've got the finished product of one of those behind me as a shameless plug. And so that has been so cool that Kathleen, I think we're going to go to this later to talk about what COVID has done to our productions, but COVID times has allowed us to expand our idea of what a production looks like. And it's limited our ideas of what a production looks like too, right? But we've gotten to explore new mediums that we wouldn't have explored otherwise. So I think that's my first little thing.
That's fascinating. What's really cool is that it's the same story, but told in two very different ways. Josephine, let's hear from you about your style of production and how that concept that you have has translated into what you're putting on stage. And I know that scenic design has also been a big part of your production. Maybe you could talk also about those visual elements too.
Sure. Yeah. So we're doing Jean Anouill's version, translated by Christopher Nixon. And it was, my relationship with Antigone, yes, like many of our actors, having read the initial Sophocles version in high school, and then I read Jean Anouill's version adaptation in college, and I was really, I just fell in love with the poetic style and visual storytelling within his adaptation. And so when we initially discussed which of the texts we wanted to be using, that was one that I immediately was drawn to. I also felt that having that thread, because yes, the number of instances throughout history that continue to remind us of that truth to power and that moral fortitude that can be so inspiring to watch in a single individual as they confront a power that's larger than themselves is it's captivating, it's amazing, it's compelling, it's something that we all want to see and we all cheer for. Our production, we are bringing ourselves back into the theater space. It's going to be within the Magnuson Theater. We're opening on the 26th of March and we're running for that weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're going to be live streaming the production into the theater. So audiences will be able to just watch straight from their home. And we'll have several cameras set up throughout the theater space to try and catch as many different angles as we can and make the experience feel like as close to being in the space as possible. At the same time, recognizing that there's only so much we have. I think we've all realized how much control we actually have of the visual performance side of what we've been exploring this past year with theater production. It's a glimpse back into the theater. I really wanted to create a world that our audiences would be drawn to, that they would be excited to even take part in just from the remoteness of their homes. That would give everyone a sense of gathering. And we've been working with one of our student designers to create an amazing set, a three-tiered set that provides, I think, 4 or 5 different entrances and exits. We've really tried to create a space that is conducive to our new reality of social distancing while creating a performance. And that's also been incorporated as well through the movement of the piece, and creating a space in which we're still able to explore this story to its fullest potential and embrace the text that Anouihl's laid out for us, while doing so in these new COVID times.
Cool. All right, let's circle back to Naphtali and talk a little bit more about these COVID times. So Naphtali, doing this play now, let's just ask that question. Why this play? Why now?
Yeah, great question. I've been thinking a lot about plague. I'm sure all of us have. But, you know, as a cast, we've talked about what happened in Thebes before the beginning of Antigone, right? That this is a city that knows plague, new plague under Oedipus, and then experiences upheaval, and then experience this fight between two brothers, right? That almost every aspect of the story is something that we can relate to currently. And I think, again, I sort of mentioned January 6th because for me as a director, that was a pivotal moment where before that date, I think I was very much approaching the script from sort of that Team Antigone perspective that we've already mentioned, right? Like, okay, Antigone's the protagonist. She is standing up for her personal sense of justice and morality, and like the terrible bad like state forces that be are pushing against her. And I felt really convicted by some of the events of the summer, right? Standing up against state-sanctioned violence, asking for justice around systemic racism. That call felt so paralleled in Antigone. And then January 6th happened, and suddenly I felt like we were talking about two different sides of a spectrum. And not to equate those two events in any sense, right? The protests of the summer and January 6th, but that idea of if each one of us is pursuing our own personal sense of justice without any conversation that is communal about what is right and what is wrong, then we have anarchy. And suddenly Creon's perspective seemed a lot more clear. And so I would say in terms of directing Antigone in COVID times, we had a really good, I think, conversation about the tension between those two perspectives, that there has to be something somewhere in the middle. And Ryan and Grace talked really beautifully about that idea of two stubborn people. And I also am imagining all kind of in this world we live in, right? Like two stubborn systems, right? Like the system of, you could say, state-sanctioned violence, or the system of the state, even if you want to be more general, right? And then like the system of nobody can tell me what to do ever. Those systems are in tension right now in a really intriguing and sometimes perplexing way.
Good. Let's come back to you, Josephine. Just responding not only to what Naphtali said, but also to the call in your heart of why this play and why now. And then I think as you close, maybe Naphtali just like kind of jump in. If you two would like to talk to each other, don't feel like you need me to tell you, okay, now you. I think now's the time. After Josephine finishes answering that question, like you guys just riff as two directors in the room. We'd love to hear you converse.
Yeah, sure. No, I completely agree. It was after January 6th, it was very much a similar discussion that we had within our own cast about individual action. And if someone is compelled enough to act on what they feel is morally right or just, is there any room or growth for debate or argument or ability to sway that opinion? And what are the costs? What is the cost of this? What is the cost of getting what you feel is morally right? And that was a tremendous discussion we had within our cast after January 6th. And it was absolutely in thread with other events that we've all collectively witnessed throughout the year, as well as descriptions and discussions about personal relationships that have been impacted by divisive opinion, and how that's played out within our own interpersonal relationships. Because ultimately this is division of family as well. And you can look at it just from its most, basic line. This is the disintegration of a family and the painful disintegration of a family. So we wanted to explore every single element of that, and attaching that to the era of COVID. It's creating a dialogue in which we were able to process this debate. I feel like after January 6th and after this entire year that's been incredibly challenging for us all, I couldn't think of a better play to process some of these discussions and these themes than Antigone, and to see other perspectives, for us to actually see the perspective of Creon, and can we find parallels in Creon to other people in our lives that we might not agree with on a day-to-day basis? How can we find ways in which we're able to communicate again? So I've found this to be a wonderful cathartic experience for us all to dive into this text and explore in the middle of these very difficult times. And a place that I've also tried to create within the rehearsal space is a place of trust, unity, of peace, of a place for us to focus our craft and practice our craft in ways we haven't been able to do in over a year, and to find some release in that. So that's been also just a part of that process with us too, as we dive into these themes and we try to not only process the play itself, but also the subtext that we see as through lines within our own daily lives.
Josephine, I imagine that you all, like us, encountered a million COVID-themed logistics around this process. And I was wondering, I'd love to hear sort of how you encountered those and how you problem solved, but I'd also love to hear, was there any moment where you were surprised by a discovery that you wouldn't have discovered if you weren't working around some of those logistical challenges?
It was interesting. It's been, this play has been blocked where no one's touching each other. We have no shared props. So people have individual props. They have individual stools for the most part, but everyone is about 4 to 6 feet distance away from each other at all times. We've tried to be really good about doing that. So I spent a significant portion of this process focusing on a lot of viewpoints work and getting the actors to understand the importance of relationship from distance, as much as being close to each other, the power of distance, or the power of levels and architecture. And I've tried to treat each of these moments as opportunities within these obstacles, that these masks aren't obstacles, they're opportunities, that, that not being able to touch Haman and Antigone, an entire scene that's written about two people embracing each other. They can't embrace each other at all. How do we see this as an opportunity for Antigone? And it's been a wonderful challenge. It's been one of the hardest challenges as a director, but I think it's been a wonderful exercise in breaking, yes, as you said, breaking our mold and trying to break the mold and try to re-see or see something differently from how you could have ever possibly seen it, and be okay with that and treat it as a process more so every day. And out of that, I think there have been moments that I wouldn't have come out had we not been in such tight, confined rules to how this production would take place. But yeah, I think it's been incredibly beneficial, as a director to be able to explore it that way. But what about you guys? How is taking this story from where you initially envisioned it, and then as the pandemic progressed, how for you as a director did you have to shift that vision more and more as you began to relearn what you were going to have to undertake?
Yeah, I'm like a physical theater person. Like when I direct, I think about shape all of the time and love incorporating movement. And so for this show, we filmed, I'm looking at my actors because they are incredibly resilient. We filmed cameras 12 feet apart. The camera in front of the actor was 12 feet away. We weren't supposed to stand close to the camera, although I did. Like I'd sneak up, while we were filming. They had to look at the camera. They couldn't look at each other. And the lighting was in their eyes. So they were basically acting into the void, only hearing their scene partner next to them. And they couldn't move because we only had this much frame and we had like a very limited amount of brocaded cloth we discovered the day we started recording that made the resolution so much better from the costume shop that we safety pinned behind them. So that was the level of what's the right word, Kate and Anna? Experimentation, improvisation, discovery that we were experiencing every day that we recorded. And I gotta say, at the beginning of this process, as we with the production team were trying to figure out like how do we do this, I was like, this is gonna suck. Like it's gonna be terrible. Like my actors are not gonna be able to do what they do. I'm not directing. I'm just cheerleading. No one's moving. Like what is even happening? And I have to say that I haven't confessed that to my cast. So this is the first time they've heard me say that. The thing I was most surprised by was how great it was. And granted, none of us have seen the final thing, right? We're still in editing mode, but to see how my actors particularly responded to every one of those challenges and could still look into a camera screen and still have a connection with their scene partner was really astonishing and helped me remember that theater is not the small things sometimes I make it or keep it, right? That it is always bigger than any of one of our imaginations. And feeling encouraged by that the thing that I felt like we aren't even doing theater. This isn't even really theater. This is just like, I don't know, practice. I was challenged to reconsider that and reframe it and to say, no, I think actually theater is bigger than I give it credit for. I'm really thankful for that experience. Anna has something to add.
Oh yeah, I was excited by the idea of like discoveries, and I remembered 2 discoveries when you were talking about them that we made, because I was very, very reluctant to act in front of a camera because I am also a big mover, and basically the entire process naturally was like, stop twitching, stop doing that, because it looks great in person, but it looks really weird on camera and it's really distracting. And so I had to totally rethink about the way that I was acting. But the cameras, number one, felt very similar to this time because I've been having so many social interactions to a camera, and sometimes my screen is off and so I can't see, and so that actually felt very, very current. And it also made us very cognizant of the fact that this whole story is happening in the public eye. At least in our translation, it's not. I'm so excited to read your guys' translations, by the way. It sounds amazing. In ours, Antigone and Haman don't have a single scene together, and there's a lot of differences, but it's everything is happening in court, in view of the chorus, in view of people that are probably commenting on what the proceedings, and having cameras on us all the time was so interesting to play with, because we got to show what it looks like when people are watching you and you can't have a breakdown. I can't break down now from falsettos, but yeah, that was just something that I thought of that I remembered.
I love that. Sorry, just and we can maybe bring everybody in, and we can bring all the actors back in now too. But I think one of the best treatments that I've seen of the chorus in any production of a Greek play, the chorus were media members with cameras. And so I love that idea, because it reminds me of one of these productions that did such a good job of like what does the chorus look like in the modern world? And in a lot of ways, it was kind of that public eye, that community eye that looks like photographers and looks like journalists and things. So I'm so excited to watch your production. I was wondering if maybe we heard from the directors about what this play, like why now, why Antigone in this moment. I would kind of love to hear what the actors think as well about what has this play like brought out to you about our contemporary moment with COVID and politics and all of these different things. And for someone who has no exposure to Greek drama, ancient Greece, any of these stories before, why should they come see these plays?
I think they should come see the plays just because art is happening. That's the number one thing right now is art is being created. And that's when in a world where Broadway is completely shut down, there's something happening. That's where my main thing of telling people, like, no, see something, because there's two universities here that are really making an effort to create something in a time where nothing is happening. But in this thing, I think why Antigone works so well, while Greek tragedy works so well, is I like that Naftali, you kept talking about January 6th, because that kept hitting me in the head over and over and over and over and over, playing Creon in this time of just absolute horror happening in our country. We've been living a Greek tragedy for the last 4 years. We have been. My personal view. But right now, why this works so well is in a world where you have to be 6 feet apart, you can't touch, you have to wear masks. Something as iconic or so presentational of what Greek theater is works so well in this time, because you can create it where, I mean, and Josephine, you even mentioned it in rehearsal the other day, where it works so well is trying to create the idea of you want to touch, but you can't. It's that need as an actor, like, I want to be physically close to you, but I can't because something else draws me away. That only works in Greek theater. That only works with Greek tragedy. And so that's why I think these shows work really well in this time, if that makes any sense.
Great. So let's pause here for our audience and just reintroduce people who are coming into our conversation now. So you heard a second ago from Amy Pistone, who's an assistant professor in our classics department at Gonzaga. And she's also the dramaturg for this production. And that was Ryan Childers, who teaches at both Whitworth and Gonzaga and is playing Creon. And with us, we also have Katie, who's playing Creon, and then the two Antigones, Anna and Grace. So let's go on with this conversation and figure out really why this play, why now for all of you, like to open out those connections between what we're doing in theater and what we're doing on the world stage.
I mean, something for me that really just stood out, like why this play, why now, that really helped me empathize with Antigone was, as a young person, as a college student, as, performing for college audiences, like drawing from the student body. You are like, you're coming of age, you're trying to identify your beliefs as a young adult in the world. And that is navigating these kind of conversations and these kind of ideological tensions of, well, what is right? What is important to me? What do I want to stand up, to fight for, to vote for, to all these sorts of things. And that was something that really drew me into Antigone, as she has identified what is important to her, but in the face of all of these other opinions that, I mean, Creon is pushing her to try and understand for the whole show. But as an audience member, we can go, okay, well, if we are trying to understand what is happening for Creon here, what is that? How do we navigate all those different kind of beliefs and all these different opinions on how this city that has been just devastated, how they can move forward. So that was something really striking to me in terms of like being, primarily young adults in our production, cast in our production, and for an audience of a collegiate space. That was something really compelling to me.
Yeah, Grace, I love what you just said of that. And like, with me with Creon, a little bit older of a character, as a college student, I'm kind of, what kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of adult, like when I go out into the world, who do I want to be? What do I want to stand behind? What convictions am I going to fall for? And then in the wider scope of this nation, who do I want in charge? Who do we want to be the face of the United States? And it was a really interesting to kind of, as a student, reflect on those kind of questions while playing this character. And I saw the parallels with the two, but that's kind of, I guess, why I think this play is relevant now.
Something that was really attractive to me about this story was exploring the gray area in between these two demonstrated extremes, because on further readings of the show, I was like, there isn't like a good guy or a bad guy. Every single character in the show makes excellent points, down to the guard who brings Antigone in and says, hey, I feel bad when friends get locked up, but I fear for my own safety. Like it really, every single character, especially in this show, has a voice. In our translation, the messenger gets a 1.5-page long monologue. The guard talks a lot. Everybody gets their fair share of speaking their mind. And there are so many varied perspectives demonstrated. And you know, to some extent, all of them make sense. And I'm very convicted to take that mindset into difficult conversations that I have with other people, because there isn't just a black and white, it's a gray area. And I am very inspired by this play to look to everyone who has strong convictions and think, how does this make sense? How does this make sense to them? How can I make sense of this? And when is it right to listen and change your mind? And when is it right to stick to what you believe? And I think that there is time for both of those all the time. And it's such like this beautiful like relief and release in the show when Creon says, I changed my mind. And it's so painful for him. And I feel that. But it also is so exciting for the audience to realize something has made sense and something has shifted his opinion. And so yeah, the idea of listening, finding the gray area, and really investigating everything that you hear and everything that you say.
Wow, that was really beautifully said. I would really like to know from Amy, what is a dramaturg and what has your process been like working on this show? Would you share those facts with us, please?
Sure. So it's, I can't not really, it comes from the Greek word that means the the worker, the person who does the drama. And so most of my role was at the beginning of the production, just kind of sitting down and doing table work with the actors. And we had 2 days of really wonderful conversations. And I had such a wonderful time being in there and just kind of talking about different versions of these stories, what Sophocles' version looks like, what this play has looked like in different contexts, kind of some of the backstory for the characters. And then we kind of went through, and the different actors were talking about kind of what they see their motivation as. And we just kind of, talked back and forth a little bit about, people had questions about like, would this have been weird? Would it have made sense to people that this would be somebody's behavior in this context? And so yeah, it was a really great experience just to kind of work with the text as written, which as someone who works on Greek plays in the ancient Greek, usually, all I'm usually working with is the written text. And so that's really where I feel most comfortable. But I really love when I have the chance to see actors who are breathing this kind of different life and getting just such a different perspective on, especially to something that Naftali said about, we can kind of get in our own routines about like, I know what I think Antigone is about. I have written things about it. I have ideas about Antigone. And then when I see actors put a different, like, oh, well, I think maybe where I'm coming from is that, I have this emotion or I have this motivation. And it really is very exciting for me to also have new perspectives that I'm bringing back to these texts that you can feel like you know a text when you've read it a lot of times and taught it a lot of times. And it's just always, it kind of breathes so much life into a text to be able to work on it, and seeing the staging and all of the amazing work that this whole production has been doing. So yeah, it's been a wonderful experience.
All right, friends. Well, I think we'll tie it up there for now. So I heard March 19th is Whitworth's opening, and Gonzaga's is the 26th of March. So check out the respective websites for Whitworth and Gonzaga. And I just also say, what a wonderful opportunity. We didn't know we were going to be doing the same plays. And actually, like, that hasn't happened before in the almost 10 years I've been at GU. I don't think that's ever happened before. So it's kind of amazing. But I think it's really, really fun. And I would love to meet all of you more often and talk more about what we're doing and just make those connections stronger and stronger. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for watching, and come and see the shows.